Hi, everyone. Thanks a million for showing up. I'm sure lots of you had a busy day at work today, no doubt. So it's great to see people like engaged and showing up to learn a bit more. And thanks a million to George for doing this as well. I was delighted to be invited, and it's great to see. So thank you, George. I won't do a big long personal intro. I am Emmet. I'm coming at you from Galway in the west of Ireland, where I live and work, and I then travel occasionally up to Dublin to work with Intercom, where the closest office is. I'm VP of Design at Intercom. I run a team of about 45 product and brand designers. I've been there for about 8 years, and we'll talk about some Intercom stuff during the presentation. Previous to that, I worked at Google. I was a designer there, and I designed flight search, and I co-founded Google's smartwatch platform called Android Wear and launched that as well. Yeah, I guess I'm going to just dive into what I'm going to talk about here today. I'm going to start actually by trying to kind of describe 4 big forces that I think are changing or set to change the role of product design, the actual role that we have. And the reason I wanted to start with those external changes is I think they all point to kind of a new definition or a new take on the role of product design that designers should and can fill within product companies. And I guess, so these are the 4 big drivers of change. I'm going to go through these one by one individually, but in short, design has gone through, product design, the job that we have has gone through a lot of big changes in recent years, from how design kind of established itself within big tech companies like Google, I suppose. And then a more recent imperative, a thing we keep hearing a lot about more and more within design, which is the need to have business impact on the business. So what's with that shift? I'll talk about that a bit. We'll look ahead to the near future, number 2, at some disruptive changes in technology that are potentially going to radically change the work that we do. I see number 3, lots of designers quite keen to take on a more like strategic role or talking about wanting to get into strategy more, which is great, but I don't hear a lot of talk about what it actually means in practice. And then finally, the 4th thing is I think that designers possess a very specific set of skills, and it makes them really well placed to meet a need within lots of businesses today and lots of tech orgs today, and I'll talk about what that is. So I'm kind of going to talk about these 4 trends or themes, and then talk about how they're pointing to like different activities that product designers can be taking. This is, however, the spoiler of the whole thing. It's that I think product designers should be taking a more central role in shaping the overall direction of the product over the medium and even the long term, and what you might call the product vision. So I'm going to cover this in 2 parts. First, look at the industry trends over time, as I said, and then we'll get into this new responsibility, or new for a lot of designers and teams, I think, of shaping a longer term vision for the product. What is that? How do you go about creating one? That's what we'll get into. Okay, so first of all, let's talk about kind of the evolution of the role of designer within design orgs and the function they've been asked to play often to date. Okay, the role has evolved a lot actually in the last 20 years. So design as a discipline, I think, got a lot of notice, largely off the back of Apple's massive success in the 2000s, right? Every company wanted some of that amazing design magic, and they quickly built up their own in-house product design teams. Lots of tech companies tended to work more and more with agencies in this era, companies like Adaptive Path and so on, which have since completely shut up shop, as most of the bigger tech companies have brought their design teams in-house. So in the 2010s, let's say, design scaled up with big tech. Larger companies, the likes of Google and Facebook, built out really massive and quite mature and effective teams, right? And some of the work that came out of these teams was great, really top-notch work, really inspirational, and I think, quite importantly for this purpose of the point I'm making, quite influential. Lots of designers went and worked in these teams. I went and worked in one of those teams, and they took what they learned and they went and took it and applied it elsewhere. And so a lot of the ideas in these large successful teams, they kind of started to define the standards and practices and principles and quality bar and so on of design teams that then went and spread throughout Silicon Valley and spread throughout beyond. And so I think it's important then to say, like, what came of all of this? Well, many successful things, right? Design is a core role at large tech companies. We have all these amazing in-house teams, and design kind of finally, after a lot of agitating for it, has a seat at the table with all these other functions sitting around it. But if we now look around at the other functions sitting around the table, all these other people, PMs, engineers, sales, marketing, finance, biz ops, these are all the people at the table we wanted to see that. And you start to ask yourself, so what exactly do these people want? Is it the same thing that we as designers want or have taught ourselves to want because of these practices that we've built up over the years? And in fact, I would argue that when you find yourself with a seat at this table, looking around at your peers and other functions, you might realize that it's actually a pretty big mistake to continue to model how we make our design team works on how design teams at companies like Google and Facebook and so on work. And the reason for that is they're very different design teams in very, very different environments. The mindset that the teams in last decade's kind of golden age mega companies had, I think, a significant blind spot. Here's the blind spot I think they had. They were only focusing on users and they were not focusing on the business. They were only focusing on users and not focusing on the business. Now, this is like a UX talk, a user experience talk, and this sounds like it might be borderline a controversial thing to say, right? I worked on the design team at Google actually for 8 years, and I saw loads of change during my time there. And broadly speaking, I will say we were not focused on the business at all. And that isn't surprising at all, because we were looking somewhere else. We were looking where the company's #1 philosophical tenet. This is like about.google.com. This is what you get if you go to that page. And on that page, it was telling us, like, look where to look. It was telling us to focus on the user and all else will follow. So this is like again, one of the core ideas that went and spread throughout many of the design teams that are common in the industry today. And it's no surprise that this idea, by the way, caught on quite broadly, because it's a pretty seductive message for a designer to hear. And it certainly worked on me at the time. Like, who wouldn't want to be told that they and their peers were so special and so important that you should, like, block off any other distractions or influences and just focus on the user? And anyone else who's working with you, anyone around the table, if they're not on board with that, they mightn't get it. A marketer might want to talk about customer acquisition, or your PM might want to talk about churn rate. But that, right, that's because they're not designers. They don't get it. They don't understand that we should all be focused on the user and everything else takes care of itself. And it was even in our job title, user experience designer. So it's not surprising that we fell into this message, like, quite fully, right? And being user focused is, of course, a great thing. But I think the problem here is that it's overly reductive. And design that doesn't, like this famous quote suggests we should, design that doesn't consider the bigger context in which it's happening is probably not bigger. It's not great design. And what's more, the context for most of us, I would bet, in this call is quite different as well, in that we don't work for one of the very small number of massive companies in the world who happen to have, like, a money printing machine, because that's what Google has, that's what Facebook has. And that's the environment in which these design teams are being built. And so it kind of insulates them slightly from the reality of the situation and the purpose that design can serve in different types of companies. So I'm trying to call out that blind spot there. I think a lot of us work for companies where the performance of the business matters, and the performance of our work has some bearing in the success or even sometimes in the survival of the company. And a lot of this has come home to our industry and been illustrated in the last year. We've seen tons of layoffs, right? the distance between the performance of the company and our work is not that great, actually. So the ultimate point I would make here is what matters is that the products that we work on need to be successful, and to be successful, they have to have some kind of longevity, not flame out, right? And they need to achieve market success and that stability in order to have the longevity and really build something that's important. So it's important for us as designers to move past like a reductive definition of product design as being just about the user, because it's not just about the user. That's important, but it's also about what the other folks around the table care about too. They care about the user, of course, but they also care about the other parts that have to fit together well for the business to actually make sense and work. I should say, by the way, that I realize like maybe for some folks, this is not new information. Lots of designers are already doing a really good job at this type of thing. Growth design is a really exciting, still emerging, I think, new sub-discipline that is kind of at the forefront of investigating what this kind of means. So it's not potentially a huge change for how some people think, but it is a shift. Here's a way of like going into a mindset shift. If we're honest about how a lot of product gets created, I think it's something like this, right? Identify a user-centered problem or opportunity, design a solution to that, and maybe as an afterthought, we're like, hey, shit, yeah, we have to consider what the business impact of this is going to be, because everyone's always asking us about that, and it is important, right? So let's try and tack that on at the end and make sure to include that too. Basically, you're focused on your problem solution with the business impact being something that comes at the end. And this is natural. Humans are keyed to thinking solutions, and many designers are creative problem solvers by nature. And by the way, there's nothing wrong with this. This is a valid way of doing things. Here's a different, additional way of figuring out what to build. It's to actually start by identifying some big, obvious gap in the business, some big way in which the business is underperforming. And then you use your designer thinking, your designer head, to think about what the obvious customer pain points that are driving that business underperformance are, and then you figure out a solution. This is the exact same, this is the same components as above, but you're approaching the problem in a different order, and you're starting by thinking about, hey, what's important to the business here? What problems are customers having in that place, and what solution can I prioritize? And it just makes it very easy to center the business opportunity rather than trying to shoehorn it in as an afterthought. This is still user-centric design, by the way. It's just user-centric design that doesn't relegate the business aspect to an afterthought. And really, I think it's possible to overcorrect in either direction, but the trick is to get the balancing right? And think about both of them. And most of us, I think, do not. We over-index on the user side. But either way, I think the takeaway from this point I'm making here is there's a broad shift happening, and correctly, I would say, away from the early big tech influence modes of designers and design teams thinking about user outcomes in isolation, and everything else will follow and it'll all be grand, as kind of some ill-defined second order outcome that will happen. And so today I see many mature design orgs thinking about user and business outcomes in harmony, in balance, the two of them together. And so that kind of brings us up to present date. And one of the the second thing that I was going to say is that the driving the changing nature of the role of designers, and that is the role of design is broadening from being user focused to also encompassing business thinking, right? Both things in balance. Okay, I also then said something coming next, changes coming that are going to change the role of designers. And here, when you're thinking about the future and what's coming next, you have to just engage in speculation. So like asterisk, warning, who really knows if what I have to say here will prove out? You can decide what you think yourself. But I think a lot of us are now looking at the incredible rate of change with all of the AI systems and things that are delivering things like text to image machine learning models, And you extrapolate and you think, wow, what happens when all this shit is properly and maturely and robustly built into our design tools, the tools that we use to create design artifacts, mock-ups, etc. Well, those tools are going to change a lot in the next decade. Like Figma is not going to look like Figma in just a couple of years' time. I mean, it will, but it'll have a whole extra layer added, I would imagine, right? That's going to massively accelerate what we're doing. So you can't look at things like GPT-4, DALL-E, Stable Diffusion, and not imagine some version of like GitHub Copilot for Figma. And we already have GitHub Copilot for coding. And that's doing a lot of the heavy lifting now for engineers who are writing code. And this will come to design. It'll come to film editing. It will come to, you know, all sorts of graphic design. It'll come to creative industries all over the place. And it will, or will likely, for better or for worse, I think, commodify UI design, commodify a lot of the work that we do. So the cost of actually creating an interface, or at least creating a mock-up of an interface, but probably a working prototype of the interface, the cost of creation will be pushed close to zero, which changes the whole dynamic for us. We've seen this kind of change before. The internet made the distribution of information near free, and this will potentially make the creation of design artifacts near free. And so you look at things that happen on the internet, like Napster and so on, if your memory stretches that far back, and you can imagine that kind of disruption happening to some of the things that we work on as well. Some of the craft aspects of what we work on. And by the way, like the early stuff here is pretty fascinating. It's terrifying, it's kind of exciting, but it's fascinating as well. And I suspect, or at least hope, that this will not make the kind of UI creation layer of designer's work obsolete, but will just give us better tools to explore and create much more efficiently and enjoyably. I don't think the tools that we're seeing are there for user interface design really yet. You see a lot of it in this Illustrator type world being interesting, but it'll get there. And I, for one, kind of cautiously welcome our new UI designing overlords, because whatever makes low-level work easier and more enjoyable and less friction to do, it gives us more time for other things. And I think that, like, if we were purely hanging the value that we bring to our organizations on the asset creation aspect of what we're doing, I think, you know, back to thinking about from visual design to product vision, there's a much bigger expansive definition of being a designer that I think we can offer here. So what are the other things that this leaves us some time for in a practical sense? I can only imagine designers saying, okay, the UI design creation happens a lot faster. Now I get to move up the layers of abstraction. Now I get to tackle design problems at a slightly higher level, and to include a more strategic definition of design and doing design work. So that's another driver of this changing nature of design. And again, it's like an additive one. It's not leaving behind what we did. It's adding something to what we did. Designers will move from being solely, in some cases, execution focused, to more and more and more being execution and strategy focused, because I think we'll see that narrowing, frankly, of the execution aspect of the role. Okay. Next big change, next big thematic change that's driving towards this shift I'm going to describe. As I said, some of this is coming from designers themselves, and for some folks doing a different type of design, a more strategic version of design is appealing, and it's a natural part of personal growth and career progression. And I hear more and more designers expressing this idea of wanting to work more on strategy, even if, interestingly, when you ask them, cool, what do you mean by that? Can you explain why? Or what? It's not immediately obvious what the day-to-day work will look like or anything like that, right? So even though they don't have sometimes a super clear picture of what the work looks like in their head, they're keen to go towards it. That's kind of interesting. It's interesting to consider the forces behind it. Why do designers, and especially more senior folks, tend to want to work on strategy even if they can't exactly define it? I have some theories. Here are some theories. Part of it might be people just keen to move on to something new, right? executional design can be joyous, and you can find a lot of value and reward in the craft, but it can also, for some people, be really hard and thankless work. And after several years of it, it can feel like a grind, or you do start to see people feeling burned out on that type of work and looking to broaden their horizons into something different. I suspect that general industry expectations of what like a senior designer is or looks like might be driving it as well. Many design orgs now have clear and well-defined job ladders. That's what this is. This is the publicly shared version of our internal Intercom job ladder. If you go to intercom.design, we share this stuff so that other teams can kind of learn from what we're doing and use them as starting points and so on. But that happens, right? People use it as a seed and then it spreads and so on. And if you look across a lot of these job ladders, then you'll see that a lot of commonalities start to emerge between them. And you will also see the theme of strategic impact start to fairly consistently appear, a lot of them, particularly in the kind of senior to staff to principal type level that a lot of people reach multiple years into their careers. So a lot of designers, look, they're naturally and correctly like rational, self-interested actors. They're personally ambitious. They want to get promoted, or they want to do exciting new things and learn. And if doing strategy stuff is the way to get promoted, they'll throw their hat into the ring for that, no problem. Another reason designers want to do this is a good one. Like, as companies scale, things get complicated. You've lots of people involved, and you start to face coordination headwinds, difficulty just like managing all of the different lines of communication and coordination to get bigger projects off the ground. A lot of companies kind of stumble into this and get surprised, because early on, when they're smaller, most companies are limited by their bandwidth to execute. They just don't have enough designers and engineers to sit down and create the mock-ups or get the code written. There are not enough hours in the day to keep up with all the ideas and ambition they have. That's like early stage or smaller companies, obviously. Then as companies scale and get larger, the main limiting factor becomes not that ability to execute, but it becomes alignment. The org just gets more complex and harder to get everyone on the same page, to make clear decisions, to just get things done. You actually have to fight hard to not just naturally slow down. Now, any designer who's been in a project, been in the trenches and battled against this kind of natural gravity towards complexity as you scale, they're probably sitting there and they're going, do you know what we need? We just need a nice, simple strategy. Some kind of plan that's going to clear everything up for everyone. We can just say, this is what we're doing, and we'll all follow the same. And by the way, they're not wrong. This can often help massively. And so it's a very useful thing, and it's an opportunity. But it's often this type of situation that designers see that opportunity, that creating that clarity gets a big group of people very, very clearly aligned. Or maybe it just sounds cool and it sounds interesting, or it sounds more important and it sounds more valuable, and people are into all of that too. I think the ultimate primary reason, however, is that more senior designers in particular, they're just smart, they're curious, they're ambitious, and they're impact oriented, and they want to grow and learn, and they're internalizing probably a combination of all these things I'm talking about, and they're responding to them. And they're saying, okay, let me try and figure out the strategy stuff and get into it. And often they find it's kind of a hard chasm to cross, because you're out on your own a little bit. You have spent the first like decade of your career or whatever it might be learning to align shapes on screens and rectangles on screens, and now you have to align people with a vision, and it's a totally different thing. And the problems are squishier and the deliverables are less clear. And you're kind of like, oh man, what even is a strategy? What does one look like? Does this mean I'm kind of becoming a PM? I, now feel like all the design skills I built, are they going to become obsolete? Is it slipping away? Will I enjoy this type of work? Will I be any good at it? Oh my God, now I think I should just do it and quit tech and start a coffee shop or take up woodworking or whatever the hell it is. And so these are the conversations you very quickly slide into when you talk to people about this strategy stuff. And it's actually not as complicated as it might seem, because despite all of these big existential questions, you still see the designers looking to seek to do it. And the reason I think why is because they see this strong fit. And this is the fourth thing that I'm going to talk about. They see a strong fit maybe between skills, the skills they have, and what the org needs, what the company needs. And there's a fairly clear and important strategic role that designers are ideally suited to occupy, perhaps better than any other discipline, and it is that product vision work. That's the stuff I did the spoiler of at the start, right? So I think it'd be good here to pause actually for some quick definitions, because lots of companies use words like strategy and blah, blah, blah to mean many different things. So just for the purposes of what I'm saying here, here's what I mean these words to mean. When I say strategy, I roughly mean what it is we want to achieve and how we're going to go about it. What is our plan as a company? So, you know, depending on the type of strategy, it can describe all sorts of stuff: competitive analysis, addressable markets, differentiators, success metrics, decisions about how we're going to win in the market, etc. So, like, super simple example, if you're making a project management SaaS product, right? A base camp type product or whatever, your strategy might be, okay, let's go after the enterprise market. And the way we're going to win there is we're going to have the widest range of integrations with other apps. We're going to integrate with all the other apps. That's really important to the enterprise market. That's how we're going to win. That's our product strategy. That is a fine strategy to have. And in fact, again, for the purpose of this talk, let's assume, right, that what I just described, project management app, let's go after the enterprise market and win with integrations. That's our strategy. Let's imagine that is perfect. The greatest strategy this company could have, this fictional company could have. But one big problem still exists for that company, which is how the hell do you go from that high level idea or plan strategy to actually executing it, to actually go and building it? You've got loads of unanswered product questions. So yeah, okay, we said we'd go after the enterprise market by focusing on integrations. What apps should we integrate with? How do the integrations work? What do they do? How do you set them up and manage them in the product, etc., etc. So the strategy kind of describes how we want to succeed, but it's not like something you can add to your roadmap or get together with the team and start building. And so there's often this big gap between strategy and execution, and that is a problem that product vision can solve, right? So your product vision fits really neatly here, and in the gap between strategy, what we want to achieve, and execution, what we're going to go and start building. It sets a specific product direction, and it will allow us to get on and move into that execution mode. It's kind of the strategy brought to life, if you will. And it fills this gap, or fills this hole between strategy and execution. And what's more, it's kind of a designer-shaped hole. It's a thing that designers can do. Many of the skills that designers have built up over their careers can be applied to building out a compelling product vision. Skills like all these things that are showing up on the screen here, right? I'm not going to read out all of them individually, but in short, they're design skills. They're the skills that we already possess, lots of us, and they are the skills necessary to create a compelling product vision, right? So we're really well suited to do this work. So our fourth driver of change and the changing nature of product design is that orgs have this need for what product designers can do. They need us to bring a strategy to life as a product vision. Okay. I'm going to pause for halfway, or maybe more than halfway, just to recap a little bit. You know, the influence of big tech had a big influence on design teams across the industry early on, but I think we're seeing lots of teams start to wake up to this balance of business impact, which wasn't a focus in big tech, being increasingly important. Number two, AI, design tools changing. It's going to change the nature of what designers are expected to do within our roles, but also create an opportunity for us to start moving up the value chain and working on less on artifact creation and more on strategy. Number 3, designers are keen and pushing for this and agitating to have greater strategic impact. So there's a desire to do it. And number 4, our companies need us to do this. They need us to guide the way for them to fill the gap between the strategy of what they want to achieve as a business and the execution of what we can do to actually start shipping that. So all of this hopefully is just like little threads that I'm pulling together that is saying that designers figuring out how to start creating clear, compelling, momentum generating product visions can and probably should and will become more and more a part of the role of product designers in the years to come. So if we take that for granted, yeah, designers should be driving product vision. You kind of start to go, okay, well, how do I go about making a product vision? Because I maybe haven't done one, or what does one even look like? So that's what I'm going to tackle from here on. What is a product vision? How to create one in just several hundred very simple steps. Which is kind of a joke because sadly there's no one size fits all out of the box process that you can apply here. Even at Intercom, we've seen product vision work taking on many, many different shapes and sizes, depending on the type of project, depending on the underlying strategy. So what I unfortunately don't have is like a cheat sheet kind of, here's the double diamond for creating a strategy. But still, again, lots of our design skills apply, as we said, and I am going to provide some practical pointers based on what we've done at Intercom. Okay, let's go. First, let's drill down a little bit into what are you trying to achieve actually with this work. So the big one we just discussed, the need for product vision to bridge the gap between strategy and execution. That's the first thing. What does that actually mean? How does that look like being put to use? Well, product vision can also be a leadership tool, by which I mean for a designer and design as a function to be leaders. Designers can use this product vision to get everyone on the same page, to get everyone understanding in very unambiguous terms what it is we're trying to achieve. And then when you have that sense of alignment, everyone bought in, everyone on the same page, not a lot of uncertainty about what it is we're proposing here, the teams can suddenly move fast. They create momentum. And we have certainly seen this internally at Intercom. Momentum builds energy and it builds positivity. And once you get that wheel really turning, it's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy. So when everyone feels like they're working towards a motivating, shared goal as a team, they feel a greater sense of purpose. And that can be really animating and magic really for teams. And so I guess the other thing I want to say here is a product vision also acts as like a North Star, something to aim for and something to orient ourselves against as we're going. So early on in a project, a product vision can create that sense that like, hey, we're all on this epic mission we're going to embark on together. Look what our vision is. Imagine if we bring it to life. It's going to be awesome. I'm really feeling that sense of ownership and belief will fuel teams, really fuel teams for the journey ahead, because building products is hard. We all know this, right? But then it's also useful on an ongoing basis, because you're maybe months into the project now. You're bogged down in all the details. Your Zoom level gets really, really low. You forget kind of where you even were at the start a couple of months ago. And in situations like this, it's very easy to forget the big picture and kind of just veer off course on the day-to-day work. So the product vision being something that we started with, it's something we can use to chart our course from the start, and we can keep looking up and referencing the vision. And we're like, are we still on the same course? Let's re-steer ourselves, constantly sense check. Are we still focused on the right things, right? Okay, so creating a product vision. I want to talk about some guardrails to creating one, first of all. And then we'll get into specifics and examples, and here's what one might look like and so on. But the first thing I'll say is like, try to be conscious about getting the balance right when you're creating this vision. Talk to the people around you and go, what's the Zoom level we want to act on? Do we want something like super high fidelity and detailed, or do we want something rough that will just unblock us in a general direction? And the thing to do with the vision work especially is try to avoid the trap of like feeling like you have to design the entire product up front. If you try and do that, you're probably going to do a bad job. You're probably going to disempower a whole bunch of people who want to be involved. But mostly, you'll never get there. So a good rule of thumb here actually is to aim for the lowest fidelity possible. Low fidelity is great when it comes to product vision, because low fidelity gets everyone kind of aligned on the same page. Oh, right, when you talk about XYZ, that's a picture of what you're talking about. Got it. We're on the same page right now. So quick, clear alignment and unblocks road mapping. We don't have all the details yet. We don't know all the design details of how it's going to work. That's fine. That's for when we're going to get into building the product and designing the product. All we're doing is like a directional sketch at this point. One that's going to point us, you know, be sufficiently detailed to get rid of the ambiguity. One that's sufficiently detailed where we're like, there are no show-stopping blockers here that we can think of, but one that is still low fidelity and you can move fast on, and the team can still go and like when they come to get it. This is not science fiction. It's very easy to fall into this trap. You're not trying to describe some unrealistic future several years from now with a ton of tech that doesn't even exist. And so in the same way I just said, try and get that balance in fidelity right. Try and get the balance right here between something that is like real enough to be achievable, like real and tangible enough to be achievable, while also being ambitious enough that it isn't just like an incremental little addition, right? And so a good way to think this, to get this balance right, I find, is like kind of pick a time frame. I would recommend anything from 6 months to 2 years for a product vision can be a good sweet spot, because less than that, maybe you're just being a little bit tactical and not ambitious enough. And more than that, you often are venturing into like, none of us know where where the product is going to be in 3 years' time. So why bother trying to, you know, plan an all-encompassing vision for that? But the point here is not too small, not too big, essentially. And then finally, this is the famous squiggle diagram that's intended to illustrate the design process and how it feels in real life. Like so much design work, you'll need to push yourself to refine the vision down, or refine it down to something really clear and focused and concise and hopefully opinionated. Something that isn't like broad and shallow, right? Something that isn't just a grab bag of feature ideas, but something cohesive and coherent, and that you can almost boil down to a single line pitch. I think ultimately you want to explain your big idea to your customers, not to your colleagues who kind of get it already, but to your customers in a couple of short, sharp, no nonsense, plain English sentences. And if you can do that, you realize, hey, I've probably boiled this down to something that can and will resonate with customers, but is a big enough idea that gets people excited as well. It can be useful, I find, to collaborate with marketing early on in this, because the hallmark of good work, good product vision work here, is that it's simple and that it's easy to understand and explain. There's another misconception about the strategy stuff, which is that it's some crazy McKinsey business juju stuff that nobody understands and it's all beyond me. I don't understand strategy. All of that is nonsense. Like, it's bad strategy if you don't understand it. It's good strategy if it is simple and easy to explain and easy for anyone to understand. And so, yes, just to demystify that. So, unlike my namesake here, the other Emmet, do not go it alone. Lean on other designers as well. Lean on your peers, lean on folks from other functions like marketing. Include them as much as you can and bring them on this process of creating a vision with you. The sooner and more deeply they're involved, the better. I'm sure every designer has seen this at the team level. Don't go away into your like cave and come back and say, hey, engineers, I built it, go design it now. You include them in the process, they're bought in and it's theirs now. And of course, they're a source of great ideas too, right? So there's not a lone wolf activity. You don't go off on some mythic vision quest in the desert on your own. It should be highly collaborative, inclusive, especially early on. And then finally, that commercial focus, the business impact thing I was talking about earlier, don't forget to try and fold that in. Don't leave it as an afterthought. How does this achieve our strategic goals? How does it ladder up to our broader company strategy? How does the work being proposed sit within the competitive landscape? How does this make this different from our competitors? How will it drive business impact? And so, it definitely helps if other designers and other product nerds think that your ideas are dope as hell and super cool. But remember that the overall goal here is differentiated power that customers value enough to pay money for. That is the recipe to a product that succeeds in the market. I will repeat it. If your product has differentiation, if it's differentiated power, i.e. it's powerful, but powerful in a different way from everybody else, if it has differentiated power, customers value that power enough to pay money for, then you're good. If you're not differentiated, they might as well go with someone else. If you're differentiated but not powerful and useful, you're just different, but you're not great. So it seems simple, but you have to just remember maybe even that one line. Does this all add up to differentiated power that customers will value? I'm going to skip over this actually because I have a slightly newer example in a second. Sorry, there's an older slide I meant to drop. I'm going to go through a case study of a different project in a second. I'm also going to kind of try and, I'm just checking the time. Yeah, for the sake of time, I'm going to fly through the next 10 or so slides. I hope that's okay. George, you can share these slides afterwards, or I'm not sure if that's something we can do. I'll stay on it. We'll figure it out afterwards. Here is a set of things that we do internally just to bring it to life, because I know this is kind of abstract and it can be difficult to grok what this stuff actually looks like. Here are some tips. Again, I don't have a ready-made process, but some techniques you might find useful. Again, don't go it alone. Form a working group. Define a DASI, which is a framework like a driver, approver, consulted, informed. Set up working sessions. Make this a team thing from the start. Align on the objectives. So here's like an actual internal doc, which is our Inbox 2 project where we redesigned our whole inbox. It was vision driven. Let's talk as that working group that we just set up. Why do we need a vision? What is the scope? How will we use it? So everyone is on the same page of the purpose of the vision as well and what we want it to achieve for us. Start collecting ideas. Hey, everyone, dump your ideas into this doc. Interview folks, record it, and transcribe it. Use all of the things that you get from talking to people as inputs for brainstorming later. Just get as many ideas out as you possibly can. Now we're getting into kind of planning. And by the way, these are all docs so far, right? We haven't like opened Figma anywhere, but this is all, I think, this newer type of design work that I'm trying to point you towards. Start uncovering the key problems and opportunities. What research do we have? What new research do I have to do? Take a look at the product yourself, audit it, find out where there's friction. Group everything you're hearing or seeing into teams, score all those teams, score them by importance, score them by how often they show up in the product, all sorts of things. Get to the point where you're like, here's a good overview of all the problems we have here. Again, get all those inputs for brainstorming together. How do your competitors do it? Are there other industries that do this well? And then run workshops. We have a whole bunch of, George mentioned the Intercom blog. We have some posts about how to run effective workshops, so I won't go into that here. But planning is obviously essential here. How are you going to use your time? Who are you going to include? What problems and opportunities are you going to explore? We have done like 5-day workshops, fully remote in Intercom. We've done 1-day versions or half-days versions of these. So there are many different versions of this that you can do. The goal is, as in many like kind of generative workshops, gather a broad set of ideas, discuss the interesting ones. Then you can go away again. Now you have a bunch of ideas for free from everyone. Now you need to like synthesize them. So here you're back into grouping, thinking, maybe starting to describe or visualize different opportunities. You can see some little UI sketches creeping in here now. And you're starting to form an opinion about what the most important stuff that you want to focus on are. Here's where the art, frankly, versus the science of the thing takes over. You need to let all this simmer and start to go, okay, I need to just synthesize all of this. I need to sketch and think, and we need to talk about, are we seeing avenues of opportunity where there's customer problems, there's clear product opportunity that can lead to business growth, and that, you know, and we think we have an interesting angle on all of this from a product point of view. Get everyone's evaluation of those ideas. There's lots of different scoring ways, or all of this that can be done yourself. Again, you don't have to go through all of these, by the way. I'm just trying to describe some of the phases or mental exercises that you might go through. And then mock up some of your ideas. Show them in front to your customers. You do not have to design and build products to find out what your customers think of it. So get on a call with them, talk to them about it, show your sales team, what are they excited about selling, understand what resonates and what doesn't. And then we're into, okay, let's shape a vision here. What are the themes of what we're describing? How will they help us to win? How does this ladder up to our strategy? How will we explain this to customers? What's our go-to-market message going to be? What is our revenue hypothesis? Because we should have at least a hypothesis about how this is going to impact the business in a positive way. And then finally, turn all of this into a story, communicate it out to the world. Talk about how we're going to go from strategy through this vision to an outcome that we're going to drive. And this then is when you share it internally far and wide, you get buy-in, getting people involved. And this is where your whole project can just start to achieve takeoff at this point. We have kind of in Intercom, as I said, like lots and lots and lots of different ways of tackling this. It can be a doc, it can be a whiteboard conversation, it can be whatever. Sometimes it can be a deck, and I think we found like the ability to craft this into a story, like a self-serve deck, which is what I'm actually showing an overview of, just to show you what this kind of looks like. This was the deck for our Inbox 2 product vision, right? Which led to a complete redesign of our Inbox product over the past year. This got shared and passed around. It was designed to be like a self-serve deck that you could read yourself. And suddenly it spread among the whole company, and everyone got a broad-based understanding of what this is. So again, using the storytelling and communicative aspects of the design skill set. Finally, then I would say, like, plan how you're going to bring it to life. Remember, we said this is going to bridge strategy and execution. So help us get a head start on the execution part. How might we split this up? Be a leader. Talk about teams that could tackle this. Talk about key projects we could turn it into in sequencing. Again, I'm describing something that's maybe very big and broad and long-term, but I'm kind of, again, trying to encourage designers to color outside the lines a little bit, and push for that roll on into the execution stage. I will say, by the way, to give a sense of timeline, our redesigned Inbox launched less than a year after the initial vision work was done. So from design kind of instigating the push for this vision of a better inbox to completely redesigning and rebuilding and launching was less than a year. And I think for the scale of that project, like a ground up redesign and rebuild of by far the most used part of the product, I would consider that to be very fast. And I think that's another illustration of the power of this type of work in aligning people. Once everyone's on the same page, it's very easy to move quickly, have a lot more fun. Let me see. Sorry, I intentionally skipped that slide. I'm going to quickly, I'm aware of time here, folks, sorry. I'm going to quickly go through like one tangible example of us doing this. This was our internally named Messenger 5 product, a complete redesign of our Messenger to be much more customizable and configurable. The most customizable, configurable business messenger was kind of the product vision in a line that we came up with. Just to give you a very quick guided tour, here's like a sense of what our messenger was like before. I will skip over some of the details. A lot of good things going for it, but a lot that didn't. We were hearing from a lot of customers that they needed a greater degree of flexibility than they were getting from it. This prompted us to just go into a series of explorations of roughly this level of fidelity, of kind of big swing ideas for what we could do to actually alter our messenger. Again, for the sake of time, I won't go into great detail in this. What I'm just trying to give you is, this is low fidelity, not a lot of information. And if you're relatively like familiar with the existing product and how it works today, you look at this and within maybe 30 seconds of looking at the mock-up and reading the text, you kind of get what the direction is. So this cannot be something that everyone in the company has to like watch a 40-minute loom to grok, right? They need to be able to like look at a couple of little sketches or artifacts like this and really get it. And then we started to get into, hey, what if we gave lots of customization and configuration opportunities, including visual design? And so this was really the animating factor here. And we started to really feel the product come to life here. We doubled down on this and we were like, right, let's take some of our customers and style, you know, this fantasy messenger for each of them. What if every customer had their own personalized messenger? And this was the thing that really like started to get people's juices going internally and actually started to get us the commitment and the buy-in to really doing this. Again, I'm glossing over some details. There's lots of strategic stuff that I don't, alignment where how this ladders up to what we're trying to achieve as a company. And this supports it, that I won't get into. But I will say in, I think this was about 6 months from like March last year to October. In October, we launched Messenger 5. We had, wow, this is super janky animation, but we had some super fancy animations and launch material and examples of all the amazing ways that you can modify your messenger. I will plug, because I glossed over a lot of this, Paul Murphy, who was one of our designers who actually did the vision for, or drove the vision for Messenger 5, wrote up the entire process, and it's on our blog. This is the article, you'll find it easily. And so if you're interested in more practical kind of example of that, you can dig into it here. But we have a few examples of this in Intercom now. Our inbox, our messenger, where we're really starting to get this feel for when there's an opportunity for design to come in, step in as a leader, set the vision for where we want to go, really like animate. I'm talking a lot of people who might work on a big project like that, really set all those people, dozens, scores, hundreds even sometimes of people in larger companies on a really tightly aligned same path beyond a very clear picture for where we're going. You can go there very fast. So I don't know if I said it, from the vision to, again, this launch, I think was 6 months, and frankly could have been less, again, because you can move very, very fast when everyone has a clear idea of where they're trying to get to. Okay. That's kind of it for me. Clearly, there is a ton of value to be created with this type of work. I think designers are really well suited to it. I don't think we get to see a lot of it, so it's useful to dig into it a little bit. In addition to those 4 different forces that I described earlier, I have a fairly strong feeling that this type of product vision work is going to increasingly become a core part of the product design role, and is a big opportunity for product designers to, you know, start to engage slightly higher up the value chain within their role. That's kind of it for me. I will say the last thing as well, like, change can be scary, but it's also healthy. I kind of opened up the door to loads of changes and things that are going to come and disrupt all our work and everything. I would encourage you to be open to opportunities to continue to evolve the design role. You know, it's evolved massively in the last 20 years, as I described earlier in the talk. It'll evolve a lot more in the next 10 than it has. So let's dive in and have fun with it. This type of work, which is a little bit away from traditional UX work, this product vision work, is challenging, it's rewarding, it's high impact. It's a great opportunity for design to step into, and I would love to see more designers take on this type of work. Yeah, that's it for me. So thanks very much.